So Scarlet Nexus is this game that's flown fairly under the radar. Not far enough to be a flop, just far enough to be something no one really talked about. I only knew about it because I saw it in a trailer in one of those games conferences a while back and went, looks cool. Well, eventually the game came out and the general consensus 3 years ago, I had written a script on this little game I'd played at the time. Reading over it now, yeah, it's maybe not so much something I would make now, but it's definitely, at the very least, passable. If I made this video, it would have been fine. Okay, even. And strangely, for a bit I was making this video. It was getting created. The voiceover, the script, and even some of the edited video is done. The strange part being that one day I had just stopped. For no greater reason than I just wanted to make something else. So I did. But just because I did, didn't mean I had to just drop that original video entirely. And that hasn't changed. In fact, if I really wanted to, I could probably finish it now and have it completed in around no time at all. Though, that would probably feel like editing somebody else's video more than editing my own. Huh. Well, either way, I'm not gonna do that because why bother? This is a video on Incompletion. Wouldn't be the first thing I haven't finished, nor the last. Hell, just this morning, I didn't finish eating my breakfast, and before that, I didn't finish having a good night's rest. Things don't get finished usually. There are more things out there incomplete than there are complete, probably. I mean, it's not like I would have any way of knowing the things aren't done. However, I'll still wager that most things that are done aren't actually done. At least not in the literal sense. Games, movies, paintings, structures, and anything else a person can do, really, has a story behind it. Depending on the scale of the project, that story is either very short or expansive beyond human limit. Take the breakfast I'm having here, for example. Bear with me here. Now, I could have had many things for breakfast, and throughout the day I'll randomly think, man, I feel ghoulish. Maybe tomorrow I'll start having a proper nutrition. Boiled eggs, I'll think. Yeah, some boiled eggs for breakfast tomorrow. Then there I will be tomorrow, eating whatever random scrap I find laying around instead. Yes, my breakfast is done, just not how I originally intended. I'm satisfied, even if I know I could have done more. Now, for personal private projects, that's usually the end. But this changes when other people get involved. Like, say a family member walked by while I was finishing up. If they were to think anything of what I was doing, it probably would have been, oh, he finished having breakfast. They'll never know of my dissatisfaction with what I've done here. All they will think is, oh, he finished having breakfast. What other people see will only ever be what got finished, not what didn't. Doesn't mean I should stop paying attention, though.
Oh.
Of course, for something as irrelevant as the inner machinations of my mind related to breakfast, nobody cares. Doubly so about the other plans I had in store for it. What? Quit looking at the bathroom, weirdo. But look, let's say something actually culturally important, like a significant piece of media or structure, or anything anybody could do, really. Yeah, maybe then keeping some notes around about the development process is important because there are people out there that would like to know about the tales of these relevancy titans. Issue is, nobody knows that they're making Citizens Kane before they are making Citizens Kane.
Oh, my hip.
Nobody knows that they're making Mario when they're making Mario, meaning all that gets left over from the development process is usually just some random scraps of paper, hard drives people forgot to wipe, and stories about how development went. These random scraps of what once was now telling the tale of how came about what now is and now is not. A lot of the times when making something, things change. Maybe a part of the original plan turns out to be impossible, like the time limit is approaching, or it's just something beyond the level of skill currently accessible. Or maybe that random part of the plan just turns out to no longer be necessary, or just gets replaced by something better. Usually whenever any of those things happen, the original plans get erased, and they just live on as stories. Fun facts, trivia, you know the type. But sometimes you'll still be able to catch a glimpse of them even after the whole project has been labeled complete. Modern media is amazing for this. The more complicated, the better. It can be easy to read over a script a couple times and iron out any kinks you may spot, and it can be fairly easy to cut and add scenes to a movie, but say long-form media that's being actively released while it's being made, or larger-than-life game projects made by a team of developers, it can be hard to keep track of everything at times, and it's only natural that some things slip through the cracks. Very rarely does media reveal how incomplete it may be, but sometimes it can happen. And when it does happen, it's usually very interesting to find out about. Lost plot threads removed for the sake of brevity still showing where they began, strangely titled file names placed where actual named characters go instead of a video game's data, staircases leading to nowhere. It can be fun to speculate about what these dead ends could have been if they were alive, but it usually just begins and ends there. Speculation. There's always reasons to why things are the way they are, and those reasons tend to take the whimsy out of anything, unfortunately. It was a placeholder. We just didn't know what to do with it. The story ended up going in a different direction. There was no need to. Etc, etc, the list goes on. Though, that last one I mentioned, there was no need to, I like a lot more than the others. It's a very blunt way of saying that something can be finished before it is finished. I love walking into one of those giant store buildings, staring up at the ceiling and being greeted by exposed vein-like pipes and blinding white lights. It's freaky looking, like I'm inside of the body of something much greater than me. It yells to me, there was no need to. I think people fail, or at least don't care enough to really consider just how little of the full picture we get to see in places like these. There's a plethora of strange hallways and empty rooms all over the place in malls that only the original builder could ever even know possibly exist. Mistake rooms they get called, and a man once lived inside of one of these mistake rooms for 4 years before he got found out and promptly kicked out. But that's just how it is when other people get involved. Why close a roof off in a store? Why cement off these random gaps created by the walls? You really could do all that if you wanted to, but why bother? Realistically, nobody's gonna notice these things, and if they do, they'll probably forget about it soon after. When people talk about incomplete things, they tend to talk about media, which, of course they do. Incomplete media is probably the most fun incomplete topic, and it's most definitely the easiest. I mean that in both ways. It's easy for me to say a random nugget of trivia, and it's even easier for someone to hear that and take it only for what it is, and not what it implies. That there must have been more. Maybe the reason these stick out in my mind so much is because I have this strange compulsion to complete things, and seeing something incompletable makes that emotion clear for me to see. It's a strange thing, the drive to finish something. It's overpowering sometimes. It can make things seem much bigger than they actually are. How important is it exactly that this gets done? I ask myself that question occasionally to check myself. It's happened a lot while working on these videos, actually. There's tons of things I thought of doing, then stopped because I realized it's not that important to what I'm trying to do. For a brief moment, I learned a lot about 3D modeling and animation. I got pretty far in that actually, all with the purpose of attempting to create an animation for my Dark Souls videos. Nothing special, mind you, but it was just a random thought I had. Then, after I gained enough knowledge to actually understand what it was that I was trying to accomplish, I stopped, because, well, a brief, random piece of animation in a video like that, while cool, would be completely unnecessary, and take a colossal amount of time and skill. That, and I knew I didn't have to. I knew I could accomplish something similar with what I actually knew how to do. Now, imagine for a moment I worked with a team of people and had told my team to do that. Yeah, that would have been horrible. It's the reason why you usually shouldn't give a creative director full freedom. Their word isn't God, they are just as human as the rest of us. On a whim they can decide something completely ludicrous, and unless they go out of their way to understand it themselves, they will never realize just how insane what they are demanding actually is. In solo projects, too much freedom just means you'll either bite off more than you can chew, or you decide to ramble about what you had for breakfast and do a toilet humor joke. When other people get involved, they can help decide when something is done. Issue is, nobody will ever know these random spur-of-the-moment attempts at something. They'll only ever know what actually got done in the end. What does that mean then? How often is a person fully satisfied with something they make? Like, no shortcuts were taken, it was all done exactly how they envisioned. Seriously, how often does that happen? Has anything ever gone according to plan? In my experiences, I've learned that the only thing that goes according to plan is that things probably won't go according to plan. The level of energy and control needed to make everything happen just how you want isn't possible. It'll only be a matter of time until you hit a roadblock you just can't take head on. And if you've wasted energy going at every single one up until that point, you'll probably be too exhausted to see another way of getting around it. It's up to a person to really think about what is worth the effort and what isn't, because energy is a sparse resource, for some more than others. Rarely in the end will things have ever gone to plan, and that's okay. So far I've made it clear that incompletion is generally a bad thing, leading to feelings of emptiness, sadness, frustration, etc. Nobody likes knowing they could have done more if they really wanted, but if you get wrapped up in those emotions and start fearing them, you'll end up trapped. Ironically, sometimes the only way to finish something is to stop working on it, or even undo work that's already been done. Take a step back and maybe come back with a new perspective, or hell, maybe just declare it done if you don't feel it is, so you just move on to something else. It's when you accept the inherent incompleteness of things that you'll begin to feel free again. Sometimes less is more. Why can't I just come to terms with that then? How come that statement, even if it's true, still feels like lying? Maybe I'm what's wrong. Self-acceptance in the face of shortcomings is important, don't get me wrong, and loving yourself in spite of them even more so, but why does it have to be in spite of? If I'm supposed to be whole, how come I find solace so easily in these fractured things left behind by others? I think that's why I love incomplete structures so much. For me, at least, there isn't anything more visceral when it comes to incomplete things than real-life structures. Specifically, giant ones. Think shopping malls, apartment complexes, sky-rises, especially if it's being actively worked on, and over time you see it develop more and more. It can be a powerful feeling, like, yeah, something impressive is going to be here, which explains the equally powerful feeling that comes from seeing the remnants from one of these now defunct projects. Like, yeah, something impressive is not there. Hollowing is the word I would use. I feel small in those moments. The titanic corpse of a modern-day Leviathan left for all to see. Its grotesque incompleteness juxtaposed by everything around it. Its bones ending for no real reason, its skin nothing more than a sun-bleached tarps. Its guts not exposed but simply missing. So blatantly does it show how much is missing. It's partly thanks to these that I realize that something being done doesn't mean it cannot become undone. Abandoned shopping malls, defunct houses, labyrinthian tunnel systems, all remnants from a bygone age. I was never told it was possible for structures to perish much like a human can. Their eyes unlit, their expressions unnaturally set, their skin pale. What once was complete, no longer being so. Of course, that's not surprising. After all, the people that made them in the first place aren't around anymore. Maybe that's where the otherworldly aura they have comes from. The world they belong to, long gone, now instead flooded with specters. To them, we must be the body snatchers. Which begs the question, who are they? That is to say, what does it mean to be a stranger? To be someone other than yourself? Which is a really vague way of putting it, so let's refine that a bit. You are you, and I am, well, not you. This is the basis of our existence, but it's still nothing more than an assumption. I'm assuming you are because I know I am. And thinking with this perspective, a strange thing happens when we look at the past and the future. When looking back, we recall, we assume events that transpired in our lives, and when looking ahead, we do much the same, which is to say that, in a way, we become strangers to ourselves. Much like life itself, we aren't static. After a certain amount of time, things change in ways that can make it so our actions, in retrospect, seem nonsensical, and the dreams we had laid out before us are now nowhere to be found, forgotten. We're fleeting. Temporary, not only in the grand scale because time will stop one day, even if only for us, but in the small scale, in the day-to-day, in the year-to-year. Like a ship, we break, we splinter, lose pieces of ourselves. Then our bodies, to the best of its own ability, attempts to replace what's lost. Eventually, most of everything gets replaced, except this process isn't perfect. Many people believe this is the reason why we age in the first place, because our bodies are incomplete in that way. Down to our building blocks, our assumptions being made. Our bodies an attempt at preserving that self, our memories a foggy instruction guide on who we must be, and the future a faded outline. All incomplete. The holes in our memories filled by a person we might not recognize, the things we experience decided by somebody who isn't even around anymore. This life we lead is ours, but the world we experience isn't. Strangers made that. We just live it. I've been thinking, why do we even create things then? If it's all fated to be incomplete, if nothing we do will ever be finished, why start working on things at all? They say you put a piece of yourself in everything you make. Well, even if I ever managed to put all of myself into something I made, it wouldn't be enough, because incomplete people can only make incomplete things. I think it has to do with being human. We as humans are incomplete by design. We need other things in order to complete ourselves, whether that's carnally, materially, or spiritually. We need there to be these things in our lives in order for them to have meaning, in order for them to, even if only for a short moment, feel complete. I guess in that sense our lives are the ultimate creation then, what we make of them the most important story of them all, because not only can they help complete the lives around us, but they are also all that will be left behind in the end. I will die, but the things I did perhaps won't. So we attempt to create, to the best of our ability, something that will outlast us, something that will make it easier for those around us when we aren't around. In the end, all we want to be is wanted, and that bleeds into our creations. They can starve, they can become disheveled, abandoned, they can die. Unfortunately, we bleed our mortality into every single thing we do, and yet it's this incompleteness that drives us together. We find solace in knowing we aren't alone in being gifted with the burden of sentience, and seeing our emotions expressed in an inherently emotionless existence. We find wholeness in those holes. They are what keep us looking for things to fill them, even if we know we will never be done doing so. Even if it's pointless, even if it's draining. A good question then is, why not simply create as much as possible? Well, that's mainly to do with that last part. Time really is a limited resource, not just for me, but for everyone. Just like us, our creations are selfish in a way. They take something with them. Time. Unfortunately, some people abuse creation's ability to siphon the time from others, but that doesn't take away from its ability to do the opposite. Sometimes people need to be reminded how important their time is, whether that be on their own, or by experiencing something somebody else did. Whether that be a place, a story, a game, an adventure, a time, and it's draining. We will always need to take from others, but maybe someday we might just be able to do something that gives back everything we took away, tenfold. I never once went to this giant store when I was alive. Only after it perished did I notice it just laying there. And it's not anything special, it's a fucking Kmart. Realistically, this store means nothing to me, but my eyes can't help but be drawn to it. Every time I drive down this busy road at 60 miles an hour, it's there. It's always there. I mean, this thing's not a blip in anyone's radar, right? No different from any other of life's leftovers, so how do they even find these places? 'Cause they do. I've never been to any abandoned place without seeing evidence somebody else was here before me. The most random trail near a quarry in a bog with no lights, next to this slumbering titan resembling a machine, had a small road that led off where I found a clearing filled with donut rings and discarded beer bottles. Somebody's bound to have a story about anything. There's no such thing as death here, only waiting. Buildings, games, books, movies, stories, pictures, memories, cardboard, ambitions, monsters, horrors, histories, workplaces, and whatever other random name we've given to all the rubble we've layered this planet with. Nothing more than the resting sediment. My malformed feet, perfect for stumbling across this shattered world we've crafted. Awaiting the day they give out and everything I was holding falls with me. That debris sharing my name becoming what gets stumbled upon. Not dead, but simply waiting to be noticed. Like this stupid Kmart, protruding just enough for my pinky toe to smash into, forcing me. I guess that's why the attempts matter then. Even if they are destined to remain incomplete until the end of time. They are our meaning. I guess what I mean to say is incompletion. Either way, I'm not going to do that because why bother? Not like I have any way of knowing the things aren't done. What other people see will only ever be what got finished, not what didn't. These random scraps of what once was, not telling the tale of how came about what now is and is not. Rarely in the end will things have ever gone to plan, and that's okay. Sometimes less is more. I think it has to do with being human. We find wholeness in those holes. That's why the attempts matter. Even if they're destined to remain incomplete until the end of time, they are meaning. I guess what I mean to say is,